Hi guys, go ahead and double check in your science notebooks. Before we get started on today's lesson, I want to review some vocabulary from last lesson. So before we were talking about sexual reproduction in plants. And remember, that doesn't mean anything to do with that kind of sex. It's just a male sperm and a female egg joining. So a couple of terms I'm going to use today as a part of our review. Remember, an organism is anything that's alive. So for instance, a dog, right? Okay. Also, we have offspring, which is a child. So if we're thinking about dogs already, we can say that a puppy is a dog's offspring, and it is an organism. Okay, so before we've talked about sexual reproduction, male and female joining together, but here, come check out this word right here. Today we're going to be talking about asexual reproduction only in plants. And here's a kind of a cool feature. If you take a look at this prefix right here, this A, that means without. So asexual reproduction is when an offspring or a child is made without sperm or egg. And that's exactly how these plants right here have reproduced. I want to give you a couple of examples how. This guy is our spider plant. You know, he normally lives on our file cabinet, but today he's here to be a part of the demonstration. It's an adult plant, it's got big leaves, and here is a special feature. Here is one of its kind of stems. It's called a horizontal runner. The other thing is that it has a scientific name. It's also called a stolon. And at the end of this, if you'll notice, is a little mini version of the spider plant. It's actually this plant's offspring, and it's an identical genetic copy. It has a couple of parts here. Do you see these little knobby looking finger things? These are actually rhizomes. That's the beginning of the roots for these. And so if you were to take this plant and just plant it in a pot, it would start growing. Eventually this part would wither and it would be its own unique plant. But for now, since it's still attached to the parent, it's called a plantlet. Isn't that a cute name? I like it. All right, so that is budding. Here is another type of plant. This guy right here is called a pothos or a pothos. This guy, you might notice I have them all over the classroom, and there's a reason why. And that's because this plant can also reproduce asexually, which means it can make a copy of itself in order to have offspring. So when a plant propagates, it's when a new organism is grown from a portion of the parent. I want to show you one of these leaves here. This is a nice, healthy plant. Do you see underneath these leaves how we have these little knobby sections? Well, guess what? If you were to take a portion of the plant, I'm going to go with this guy here, and cut it, as long as it has one of these little knobby pieces, if you take it and you put it in a cup of water in a sunny window, I did it with this guy maybe 3 weeks ago, those little knobs that we saw before have turned into roots. Now at this point, this plant, do you see how the leaves are nice and green and healthy? It can probably be planted and be its own plant. So check this out. This one I did a couple weeks ago. This plant is about 2 years old. So it can grow from this all the way to this and eventually into this just by reproducing asexually through propagation, which means cutting off a piece of the